Hey guys, today we're in the book of Judges, chapter 18. So yesterday we saw in chapter 17 Micah and the sin of him setting up these idols and creating this false kind of worship center in his backyard. Today in chapter 18, we see that the sin is not just to one man, but it is really to all of Israel, right? Remember I said 17 and 18 starts to give us a picture of how bad Israel really is. And we see that more fully today. It says, in those days there was no king in Israel. Once again, they never had a king, but they weren't looking to God as the king as they had before, right? So they're just not looking toward God to lead them. And in those days, the tribe of people of Dan was seeking for itself an inheritance to dwell in. So remember, back in Joshua, all the tribes were allotted a land. And the same goes for the tribe of Dan. They had land. And God, through Joshua, told them that they were given this allotment of land and they were to drive out the rest of the remaining of the Canaanites so that they could take over their full inheritance. Well, years have gone by now and Dan doesn't want to do that. They're finding out it's too hard, it's too difficult. They're not trusting God to give them their land and to be with them in battle as they're pushing out the Canaanites. So they got an idea that said, you know what, it's really hard here in Dan. Let's kind of walk around Israel and see where can we steal some land from. Now remember, all of Israel is owned by Israelites, right? God has allotted each tribe a land. And so when they don't want to take over their own land. They want to steal land from another tribe of Israel. So you can start to instantly see that Israel doesn't really care about its brothers anymore. It's not thinking about Israel as a whole. They're thinking only of themselves. And so it says, let's go to the hill country of Ephraim. So once again, this is another tribe. And they come across Micah. And they come across Micah and they recognize the voice of this Levite. Now, we're not told why or how they recognize this Levite. Maybe they actually knew him, or maybe they realized that he had a southern accent. Remember, he was from Judah. And so they're like, hey, I understand that. I can see what's happening. And so these spies that were going around seeing where they could find land, they're now in Ephraim. They come to this Levite and they say in verse 5, and they said, inquire of God, please, that we may know whether the journey on which we are setting out will succeed. Think about what they're asking, okay? Sinful people from Dan on a sinful mission to steal land from Ephraim, from the tribe of Ephraim, are asking a sinful Levite if God is blessing their journey. It doesn't make sense, right? Like, it's so much sin in there, they would have no idea what God is saying. But you have here this Levite, this crooked Levite. He says, oh, absolutely. Go in peace. The Lord, the eye of the Lord is upon you, right? He didn't know. He's not talking with God. He doesn't care about God. He only cares about the money that he's being paid by Micah. Then the 5 men departed and came to a place called Laish. And so they come to Laish. And they see that there are a group of people known as the Sidonians. Now, you won't remember, but back in Joshua, Joshua chapter 13, Joshua tells them in verse 4 to drive out the Sidonians, okay? These were Canaanites and they were supposed to drive them out. Well, they didn't drive them out. And so now they are living in the land of Ephraim, not in the cities where the Israelites, but just kind of off, right? It talks about how they were quiet, they were unsuspecting, that there was nobody around them. And so what had happened through these years, right? Remember, the book of Judges covers hundreds of years. And so what had happened is Israel started living here and they started leaving these Canaanites, and these Canaanites have built their own cities and they're living together peacefully. But even though they're peacefully, doesn't mean that it's good, right? They're still going to have their own gods, their own worship ways. They're going to go to the same markets and the towns, and so things are going to rub off. This is not what God has told them to do. So they see this land and they say, hey, it's easy for us to take over this land, right? These Sidonians are nothing, right? These are nobodies. So verse 11, it says, so these spies come back to Dan, to Dan, and they get 600 men. And notice this, it says they armed with weapons of war. Now remember why they're doing this, okay? These Danites, right, are going to Ephraim, and they're going to fight the Sidonians, this Canaanite tribe in the land of Ephraim, to steal the land from their brother Ephraim, because they don't want to fight or wage war at home in their own place, in their own allotment of Dan. You get what I'm saying? That doesn't make sense, right? They said it's too hard to conquer Dan, so we're going to go somewhere else and start conquering it. It doesn't even make sense, right? It makes absolutely no sense. They don't want to wage war at home, but they'll go somewhere far off and wage war. It just shows you just how crazy these people are. They're not trusting God. They don't want to do what God says. They want to do what they want to do, right? And so that's what happens. And so they get these 600 men and they start marching back to the Sidonians in the land of Ephraim. And they say, hey, on the way, we know this guy named Micah. And Micah has built a little temple, a little shrine to some gods. And there's some idols there. There's some metal images there. They have an ephod. They have a priest there. You guys want to stop there? And these Israelites of Dan said, yeah, absolutely. Let's stop there. And they go and they say, hey, we're going to steal all of your idols. We're going to steal your ephod. We're going to steal your priest. We're going to steal everything because we want all religious things to come with us, right? As much religious things as we have, it makes us better. It makes us more holy. It makes more gods will be with us so that we will win. And so they come up and they steal everything. But notice what happens. They start to walk off and we see that Micah, right? Micah chases them down and says, whoa, wait a minute. Why are you stealing my gods? Why are you stealing my idols? Why are you taking my priest? This is my stuff, right? A little side note here. If you have to go and save your God, he's probably not a good God. But that's exactly what Micah is doing, right? Notice what it says. It says that Micah made these gods. He took the carved image, the image, right? And he said, keep quiet, put your hand on your mouth, and you will come with us, right? Talking about the priest. And then when Micah comes in verse 24, he says, you take my gods that I made and the priest. How crazy is that statement? That Micah chases down this army of 600 people, has stolen these gods, and he says, wait a minute, you've taken my idols. You've taken the gods that I have made. How dare you? You've got to return my gods that I made. Who wants a God like that? Who wants a God that I made, that I have to go protect, that I have to try to get you back from an army? If you were God, you'd be more powerful than anything. Why do I have to come and get you, right? It's because it's nothing. It's just a block of silver, right? It's absolutely nothing. And so here he says, hey, why are you doing this? And the people from Dan, the Israelites, said, do not let your voice be heard among us, lest angry followers fall upon you and you lose your life. Israelites from Dan are telling another Israelite, Micah, if you don't shut your mouth, we will kill you. So you can instantly see how bad it has gotten. Israelites are now fighting Israelites. They're turning against one another. They're stealing one another's land. They're not seeing God as king. The only thing they care about are these little images and idols and ephods and these little crooked Levite priests, right? This tells you how bad it has been. And the people of Dan went away, and Micah saw that they were too strong for him, and he turned away and he went back home. He couldn't rescue his gods, so they stole his gods and went on. The people of Dan took what Micah had made, and the priests belonged to him. And there was no deliverer because it was far from Sidon. There was no deliverer. There was no judge. There was no person that was leading this in a spiritual battle. It was every man for himself. And so they go and they beat all the Sidonians, right? And so they destroy all the Sidonians. And notice what this says, verse 29. And they named the city Dan. And after the name of Dan, their ancestor who was born of Israel. But the name of the city was Laish at first. This city that they conquer is called Dan. Now, this don't mean much to you now as you're reading through the Bible from the beginning. But if you know any part about your Bible, the city of Dan will be huge as we go forward. Okay? The city of Dan, which today I would love to take you there. It's right underneath Lebanon. You can't go there right now. This is literally where a lot of missiles are falling. But the place Tel Dan, or Dan, the city of Dan, is amazing. It's an amazing place. But Dan becomes an amazing place for one reason. Not because God blessed it, but because Dan becomes the opposite place to worship God. Remember, the tabernacle is in a place called Shiloh, right? Which is kind of like central Israel. Now, this place in Dan, they built it. It's in the very northern border. It's called Dan. And they're going to build there a place that is a rival to the tabernacle. And here they will worship in Dan in the future many, many, many gods. And so basically, the northern half of Israel will stop going south to the tabernacle to worship God, but they will come north to worship at Dan, which will be kind of like, think in your mind like just this Walmart of gods, right? They're going to have all kinds of gods in this huge building, and it's going to become this huge worship capital, but they will worship everything except for Yahweh there. But it all started with Israel leaving what God has given them, stealing from their brothers, threatening to kill their brothers to create this new worship place that is not for Yahweh, but is for any and every other god that they can create. Verse 30, the people of Dan set up the carved images for them, as well as they set up sons that were priests, right? So they create a priesthood there, even though they were Levites, but a Levite was to worship at the tabernacle. It was to serve at the tabernacle, but now these priests are worshiping and serving at a different place where there's many gods. So you can see in the beginning, they're starting to create this second place of worship. And this will be the ultimate destruction of Israel as we continue to read and why God allows Assyria to come in through the north to destroy this place called Dan, which will happen many years from now, but kind of setting up the story. So you can see it's not just a few people in Israel's bad, but Israel itself is turning very bad, very wicked, and not looking to God. They're looking to everything but God. So I hope that makes a little bit more sense, and we will see you tomorrow in chapter 19. God bless.